The Austin sun hammered the asphalt with merciless intensity, turning the Lone Star Tower's parking garage into a concrete furnace. Samuel Rodriguez sat motionless in the driver's seat of his modified van, watching the digital readout on his salvaged laptop climb past 103 degrees Fahrenheit. The cooling fan wheezed like an old man's lungs, fighting a losing battle against the Texas heat. Through the grimy windshield, he observed the morning ritual of Nexus Dynamics employees streaming into the gleaming tower. Designer suits, luxury cars, and the casual arrogance of people who had never wondered where their next meal would come from. Samuel's fingers traced the edge of his military dog tags, hidden beneath a threadbare polo shirt that had once been white. "Another day in paradise," he murmured to himself, the words bitter as burnt coffee. His phone buzzed, a text from Elena Vasquez, though he knew her only as EV Consulting in his contacts. System instability increasing. Phase 2 initiated. Stay ready. Samuel deleted the message and returned his attention to the tower. Somewhere in those pristine floors above, Marcus Blackwell was about to discover that his empire had a very particular kind of termite problem. The Nexus Dynamics server farm hummed 24 floors above the parking garage, its climate-controlled environment a stark contrast to the sweltering heat below. Marcus Blackwell stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, adjusting his Hermes tie while admiring his reflection in the glass. At 38, he projected the image of Silicon Valley royalty, sharp jawline, perfectly styled hair, and a smile that had convinced investors to hand him $900 million. "Sir?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The morning briefing is ready." Marcus straightened his suit jacket and strode into the conference room, where his executive team waited with the reverence of courtiers. Charts and graphs glowed on multiple screens, painting a picture of exponential growth and market dominance. "Gentlemen, ladies," Marcus began, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of a televised TED Talk. "Last quarter's numbers confirm what we already knew. Nexus Dynamics isn't just leading the cybersecurity market, we're redefining it." Heads nodded in synchronous agreement. Chief Technology Officer David Park shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the only one who understood the technical reality behind Marcus's grand pronouncements. "The Pandora Protocol continues to be our crown jewel," Marcus continued, clicking to a slide showing their flagship security system. "0 successful breaches in 3 years. 0 vulnerabilities. It's not just software, it's digital architecture that approaches perfection." David cleared his throat. "Actually, Marcus, we've been seeing some unusual network anomalies." "Anomalies?" Marcus's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened. "David, I think you mean optimization opportunities. The Pandora Protocol doesn't have anomalies. It has features." The room fell silent. David's face reddened, but he said nothing more. In the hierarchy of Nexus Dynamics, questioning Marcus Blackwell's narrative was career suicide. "As I was saying," Marcus resumed, "our acquisition strategy continues to pay dividends. Small companies with big ideas, minimal overhead costs. We identify the innovation, acquire the assets, streamline the personnel." He clicked to another slide showing a timeline of company acquisitions. Among them, buried in a list of forgotten startups, was Pandora Systems, purchased 3 years prior for what the slide optimistically called strategic technological integration. "The beauty of our model," Marcus explained to his captive audience, "is that we don't just buy companies. We rescue promising technology from the chaos of small-scale mismanagement. Take Pandora Systems. Brilliant concept, terrible execution. One engineer having a mental breakdown nearly killed the entire project, but we saw the potential, extracted the value, and transformed their amateur hour into our professional triumph." Marcus had told this story so many times, he almost believed it himself. The reality that he had never understood a single line of the Pandora Protocol's source code was a secret he guarded more carefully than nuclear launch codes. 20 floors below, Samuel's laptop chimed softly with an incoming system alert. He glanced at the screen and saw exactly what Elena had predicted: cascading microfailures in the Nexus Dynamics network infrastructure. Nothing catastrophic yet, but each error was precisely calibrated to create maximum executive panic while remaining just mysterious enough to stump their internal IT team. Samuel smiled grimly. Eleanor had learned from the best. The executive meeting was interrupted by David Park's phone, buzzing insistently. His face went pale as he read the incoming alerts. "Marcus, I'm sorry, but we have a situation. The primary servers are showing significant instability. Load balancing is failing, and we're seeing packet loss across multiple nodes." Marcus's perfect smile finally cracked. "What kind of situation?" "The kind that could take down our entire client base if it escalates. We need to handle it," Marcus snapped. "Quietly, the IPO roadshow starts next week. I will not have some technical hiccup derail 3 years of preparation." David gathered his laptop and tablet, fear evident in his movements. "I'll get the team on it immediately." As the room emptied, Marcus remained at the window, his reflection now showing something closer to his true self, a man terrified of being exposed as a fraud. He pulled out his phone and called his personal assistant. "Jessica, cancel my lunch and get me everything we have on system security protocols. I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with." What Marcus didn't understand was that he was dealing with a ghost. A ghost with very specific knowledge about systems that bore his name but contained someone else's soul. Down in the parking garage, Samuel opened a can of lukewarm energy drink and settled in for the show. His laptop screen displayed a network monitoring interface that would have impressed Pentagon cybersecurity specialists, which, given his background, made perfect sense. The beauty of Elena's plan wasn't just its technical elegance, it was the psychological precision. Every system failure was designed to trigger Marcus Blackwell's deepest fear, being revealed as technically incompetent in front of people who mattered. The failures were sophisticated enough to stump junior engineers, but simple enough that any genuine expert could diagnose them immediately. Samuel had once been that expert. Before the nightmares, before the breakdown, before the VA hospital and the months of sleeping in his car, before Marcus Blackwell had stolen his life's work and built an empire on the foundation of Samuel's genius. The irony was almost too perfect. The Pandora protocol that made Nexus Dynamics famous was named after the mythological box that released chaos into the world. What Marcus didn't know was that Samuel had built a very literal interpretation of that myth into his code, a hidden function that could, with the right sequence of commands, open a digital Pandora's box that would reveal every secret the system had ever protected. Samuel's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a different kind of message, a news alert about Nexus Dynamics' upcoming IPO, $900 million in projected valuation. Marcus Blackwell's face smiled from the thumbnail image, radiating the confidence of a man who believed he had built something magnificent. "Enjoy it while it lasts," Samuel whispered to the screen. Above him, in climate-controlled comfort, Marcus Blackwell was about to discover that some boxes, once opened, could never be closed again. The homeless veteran in the parking garage was no longer just Samuel Rodriguez, former Army Signals intelligence officer struggling with PTSD. He was patient zero in an epidemic of justice that Marcus Blackwell had unknowingly brought upon himself 3 years ago when he had decided to build his fortune on stolen ground. The van's thermometer read 107 degrees, but Samuel felt perfectly calm. After all, he had designed the system that was about to fail. He knew exactly how hot things were about to get. The fluorescent lights in the Nexus Dynamics server room cast harsh shadows across David Park's exhausted face. 3 days had passed since the first system anomalies, and what had begun as minor glitches had evolved into a full-scale technical crisis. Server banks that should have been purring with digital efficiency now blinked with warning lights like a Christmas tree designed by a sadist. "Talk to me, Sarah." David said to his lead systems administrator, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who had been running diagnostics for the past 18 hours straight. Sarah Chen looked up from her triple monitor setup, her eyes red-rimmed from staring at cascading error logs. It's like nothing I've ever seen, David. The failures are following a pattern, but every time we think we've identified the root cause, it shifts. It's almost like the system is learning. David felt a chill that had nothing to do with the server room's aggressive air conditioning. Learning how? Look at this. Sarah pulled up a network topology map on the main display screen. Red nodes pulsed across the diagram like infected cells in a digital organism. The initial failures started in the legacy authentication modules, components that date back to our acquisition of Pandora systems. But instead of cascading randomly, they're propagating through the network, using pathways that shouldn't exist. Shouldn't exist? Someone built hidden channels into the original architecture, backdoors that bypass our security protocols entirely. It's like having secret tunnels in a building that don't appear on any blueprint. David stared at the screen, his mind racing. The Pandora protocol was supposed to be Marcus Blackwell's masterpiece. The technological foundation that had attracted hundreds of millions in investment capital. If it contained undocumented backdoors, the implications were catastrophic. "Have you told Marcus?" Sarah's expression darkened. "I tried." He said, and I quote, "Fix the glitch, don't create conspiracy theories." He's more worried about the IPO than the integrity of our entire security infrastructure. 23 floors above them, Marcus Blackwell sat in his office, practicing his presentation for Goldman Sachs. The IPO roadshow would begin in 4 days, and he had spent the morning perfecting his pitch about Nexus Dynamics' revolutionary approach to cybersecurity architecture. His phone rang. The caller ID showed David Park's extension. "David, please tell me you have good news." "Marcus, we need to talk, in person. The server issues are more serious than—" "How serious? Are we down?" "No, but then fix it. I don't have time for technical hand-wringing. We have investors flying in from 3 continents, and I will not have this company's reputation damaged by your team's inability to handle routine maintenance." Marcus hung up before David could respond. He had learned long ago that the key to maintaining authority was never allowing subordinates to explain why something couldn't be done. Leaders gave orders. Employees followed them. Everything else was weakness. What Marcus didn't know was that his conversation had been monitored by someone who understood the system's true nature better than anyone alive. In the parking garage, Samuel Rodriguez sat in his van with headphones connected to a device that would have impressed NSA surveillance specialists. The small black box, cobbled together from salvaged electronics and military surplus components, was capable of intercepting cellular communications within a 2-block radius. Samuel wasn't just eavesdropping randomly. He was listening for specific keywords, voice patterns, and conversation threads related to the Pandora protocol. Every call Marcus made, every technical discussion in the Nexus Dynamics building, was being recorded and analyzed by software that Samuel had originally designed for counter-terrorism operations. The irony wasn't lost on him. 3 years ago, he had been building systems to protect national security. Now he was using those same skills to document the systematic theft of his life's work. His laptop chimed with a new message from Elena. "Legal framework complete. Senator Morrison's committee ready to move. Needs smoking gun within 72 hours. Samuel smiled grimly. Elena had been busy. Senator Rebecca Morrison chaired the Senate Subcommittee on Cybersecurity and Technology, and she had been investigating the privatization of military technology for the past 2 years. Elena's consulting firm had been quietly feeding the committee information about defense contractors who were profiting from stolen government research. Marcus Blackwell didn't know it yet, but he was about to become the poster child for that investigation. Samuel opened a secure folder on his laptop labeled Pandora Documentation. Inside were hundreds of files that told the complete story of his original company. Technical specifications, patent applications, military contracts, and most importantly, the source code repository that proved he was the Pandora Protocol's true architect. Every function, every variable name, every comment in the code bore his digital signature. When he had designed the system for Pentagon use, he had embedded multiple layers of authentication that would allow him to prove authorship even if the code was stolen and modified. Marcus Blackwell had acquired the Pandora Protocol, but he had never bothered to read the documentation that would have revealed its true origins. He had simply rebranded Samuel's work as his own innovation and built a billion-dollar company on that foundation of theft. The deeper irony was that Samuel had originally designed the system to be unhackable by external threats. But like any security system, it had administrative functions that allowed authorized personnel to perform maintenance and updates. Samuel still possessed the master authentication keys that would allow him to access those functions remotely. Elena had been right to call it the perfect trap. Marcus had built his empire on stolen ground, and Samuel held the deed. Another message appeared on Samuel's screen. Phase 3 authorized. Blackwell taking bait. Executive meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. Samuel checked his watch. It was 1:47 p.m. Time to get closer to the action. He climbed out of the van, feeling the blast furnace heat of the Austin afternoon. His clothing, cargo pants and a faded polo shirt, marked him as invisible to the business casual crowd that populated the Lone Star Tower. Homeless people, he had learned, possessed a kind of social camouflage. Most people looked through them rather than at them. Samuel made his way to the tower's loading dock, where he had cultivated a friendship with Jerry Kowalski, a security guard who worked the afternoon shift. Jerry was a fellow veteran, Army infantry, 2 tours in Iraq, and he had never asked too many questions about why Samuel sometimes needed to access the building's service areas. "Afternoon, Tech," Jerry called out, using the nickname that Samuel had told him was short for Technology Solutions, a one-man consulting firm that helped small businesses with computer problems. "Hey, Jerry, busy day?" "Crazy busy. Something's got the suits all worked up. Emergency meetings, people running around like their hair's on fire. You hear anything about server problems?" Samuel shrugged noncommittally. "Server problems are like plumbing problems. Nobody notices until something breaks." Jerry laughed. "Ain't that the truth? You need anything?" "Just thought I'd grab a soda from the vending machine. The heat's brutal today." Jerry waved him toward the employee break area. "Help yourself, and stay cool, man." Samuel made his way through the service corridors of the Lone Star Tower, past break rooms and utility closets, until he reached a maintenance area that offered wireless access to the building's internal network. He pulled out a tablet, another piece of surplus equipment that he had modified for specific purposes, and connected to the Nexus dynamic system. The tablet screen filled with real-time data from the company's internal communications network. Emails, calendar appointments, internal chat messages, all flowing past like a digital river that Samuel could read with the fluency of a native speaker. What he saw confirmed Elena's intelligence. Marcus had called an emergency meeting of the entire executive team. The agenda was simple: system crisis management and IPO implications. Samuel opened another application on his tablet, a program that would allow him to access the Pandora Protocol's administrative functions. The system still recognized his biometric authentication, stored in encrypted form within the deepest layers of the code. For the first time in 3 years, Samuel Rodriguez was about to become the ghost coder again. The executive conference room on the 32nd floor of Nexus Dynamics buzzed with nervous energy. Marcus Blackwell stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, his usual confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem," he began, dispensing with his usual theatrical warm-up. "Our technical team has been unable to resolve the server instabilities, and we're now less than 72 hours from the beginning of our IPO roadshow." Chief Financial Officer Amanda Morrison raised her hand tentatively. "How serious are we talking? Are we looking at potential downtime?" "Worse," Marcus admitted. We're looking at potential exposure of our core intellectual property. Someone or something is systematically probing our security infrastructure." David Park leaned forward. "Marcus, I need to tell you what Sarah discovered. The failures aren't random. Someone with intimate knowledge of our system architecture is orchestrating these attacks. They're using hidden access points that were built into the original Pandora protocol." Marcus's face went white. "That's impossible. The Pandora protocol is proprietary technology. No one outside this company has access to—" "The original developer might," David interrupted. The room fell silent. Marcus's carefully constructed narrative about the Pandora protocol being his personal innovation was something everyone accepted, but no one truly believed. The technology was too sophisticated, too elegant to have emerged from Marcus's limited technical background. "The original developer is irrelevant," Marcus said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "We acquired all rights to that technology, legal, binding, final. But what if he retained some kind of administrative access?" David pressed. "What if there are authentication keys that we don't know about?" Marcus slammed his hand on the conference table. "Then find them, disable them. I don't care what it takes. We are not going to let some bitter ex-employee destroy 3 years of work and $900 million in valuation because he can't accept that his amateur hour operation failed." In the building's service corridor, Samuel Rodriguez smiled as he listened to every word through the surveillance system he had just activated. Marcus Blackwell was about to learn that some failures were more devastating than others. "What caught your attention the most about this corporate conspiracy? The stolen military technology, Marcus's complete technical incompetence, or the elaborate revenge plot that's been 3 years in the making? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear which detail made you most indignant. The trap wasn't just set anymore, it was about to snap shut." The emergency descended on Nexus Dynamics like a digital plague. By 6:47 a.m. on Thursday morning, every server in the primary data center had entered what Sarah Chen grimly described as cascading failure mode. Customer databases were corrupting. Security protocols were reverting to factory defaults. The Pandora protocol, Marcus Blackwell's crown jewel, was eating itself alive from the inside out. Marcus stood in the server room, his Armani suit rumpled from an all-night crisis session, watching his empire crumble in real time. The room buzzed with frantic activity as technicians ran between server racks like medics on a battlefield, their faces illuminated by the hellish glow of error messages scrolling across dozens of monitors. "How bad is it?" Marcus demanded, cornering David Park near the primary server bank. David's eyes were bloodshot from 18 hours of continuous troubleshooting. "Catastrophic. We're losing client data faster than we can back it up. The system isn't just failing, it's actively rejecting every repair attempt. It's like the servers have developed an immune response to our own administration tools. That's impossible." "So was everything else that's happened this week," David snapped, his professional deference finally cracking under stress. "Marcus, we need help. Real help. Someone who understands the original architecture." "Absolutely not." Marcus's voice carried the sharp edge of panic disguised as authority. "We handle this internally. I will not have this company's reputation destroyed by admitting we can't manage our own technology." "Then what do you suggest? Because in approximately 4 hours, we're going to start losing major clients. And in 48 hours, you're supposed to be presenting this same technology to Goldman Sachs as the future of cybersecurity." Marcus stared at the wall of failing servers, his mind racing through increasingly desperate options. The IPO roadshow represented everything he had worked toward: validation, wealth, and permanent escape from the nagging fear that someone would eventually expose him as a fraud. "Get everyone out," he said suddenly. "Clear the server room. I need to think. Marcus, we can't stop working on this. Every minute we delay. Get everyone out." The technicians and engineers filed out of the server room, leaving Marcus alone with the digital chaos he couldn't understand. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, looking for anyone who might have answers. His finger stopped at a name he hadn't called in months. Elena Vasquez, cybersecurity consultant. Elena had done some contract work for Nexus Dynamics the previous year, a security audit that had identified several minor vulnerabilities. She was expensive, discreet, and most importantly, she understood complex systems architecture. Marcus had always suspected she knew more about the Pandora Protocol than she admitted. He dialed her number. Elena Vasquez Consulting. Elena, it's Marcus Blackwell. I need your help. Emergency consultation. Name your price. There was a pause. What kind of emergency? Total system failure. The Pandora Protocol is rejecting all administrative access. I need someone who can diagnose the problem and fix it immediately. Another pause. Longer this time. I see. When do you need me? Now. This morning. I'll pay triple your usual rate. I'm afraid I can't help you directly, Marcus. I'm in Washington this week, testifying before a Senate subcommittee, but I might know someone who can assist you. Marcus felt a surge of hope. Who? There's a freelance systems specialist who handles complex troubleshooting. He's unconventional, but he has a reputation for solving problems that stump entire IT departments. The only issue is that he's particular about how he works. Particular how? He's homeless, Marcus. Lives in his van, operates out of parking garages and coffee shops. Most executives won't give him the time of day because of his appearance. But if you're desperate enough to look past the surface, he might be your only option. Marcus gritted his teeth. The idea of bringing a homeless person into his pristine corporate environment was almost as horrifying as the prospect of system failure. But Elena was right. He was desperate. How do I contact him? You don't. I'll reach out to him and explain the situation. If he's interested, he'll find you. His name is Tech Rodriguez, and he'll probably approach your building sometime this morning. Fair warning, he doesn't look like much, and he's not impressed by corporate hierarchy. Treat him with respect or he'll walk away. Fine. Whatever it takes. Elena's voice carried an odd note of satisfaction. Oh, and Marcus? He only works for pizza. It's a quirk of his. Don't ask me to explain it. The call ended, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in disbelief. His billion-dollar company was being held hostage by failing servers, and his only salvation was apparently a homeless man who worked for Italian food. 3 floors below, Samuel Rodriguez sat in the Nexus Dynamics lobby, reading a newspaper and sipping coffee from a foam cup. To the security guards and receptionists, he was just another homeless person who had wandered in, seeking air conditioning and free Wi-Fi. They watched him with the casual alertness of people accustomed to managing undesirable visitors. Samuel's earpiece crackled with Elena's voice. Phase 4 initiated. Blackwell took the bait. You're cleared for approach. Samuel folded his newspaper and approached the reception desk. The young woman behind the marble counter looked up with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Can I help you? I'm here to see Marcus Blackwell, Samuel said quietly. About the server problems. The receptionist's expression shifted from polite dismissal to confusion. Do you have an appointment? Elena Vasquez sent me. She said Mr. Blackwell was expecting someone to help with technical issues. The receptionist picked up her phone and dialed an extension. Mr. Blackwell, there's a gentleman here who says Elena Vasquez sent him about technical issues. She paused, listening. Yes, sir. I'll send him up. She hung up and handed Samuel a visitor's badge. 32nd floor, elevator bank to your right. As Samuel rode the elevator upward, he felt the familiar weight of his dog tags beneath his shirt. 3 years ago, he had ridden this same elevator as a respected businessman with a security clearance and a reputation for building unhackable systems. Now he was returning as a ghost, about to reclaim what had been stolen from him. The elevator doors opened to reveal Marcus Blackwell waiting in the hallway, his usually perfect appearance disheveled from the ongoing crisis. His eyes took in Samuel's appearance. Cargo pants, faded polo shirt, worn sneakers, and barely concealed distaste flickered across his face. You're the specialist Elena mentioned. I'm Tech Rodriguez. I hear you're having server problems. Marcus led him toward the conference room, speaking in the carefully controlled tone of someone trying to maintain dignity while swallowing pride. Our system is experiencing cascading failures. Multiple security protocols are offline. We've lost administrative access to our primary servers. Sounds serious, Samuel said mildly. What kind of system architecture are we talking about? The Pandora Protocol. It's a proprietary cybersecurity platform that I developed for enterprise-level applications. Samuel nodded, as if he had never heard the name before. Military grade? The finest civilian security technology in existence, Marcus replied, his ego unable to resist the opportunity for self-aggrandizement even in crisis. They entered the conference room, where the executive team sat around the table like survivors of a corporate apocalypse. David Park looked up hopefully as Samuel entered, then did a double-take at his appearance. "This is our consultant," Marcus announced. "Mr. Rodriguez will be conducting a diagnostic assessment of our system failures." Sarah Chen stared at Samuel with undisguised skepticism. "No offense, but are you qualified to work with military-grade security architecture? The Pandora Protocol isn't exactly entry-level technology." Samuel met her gaze calmly. "I've worked with similar systems before." "Where?" Marcus demanded. "What's your background?" "Army Signals Intelligence, 15 years of experience with classified communication networks, Pentagon security clearance." Samuel's voice carried no boastfulness, just quiet statement of fact. The room fell silent. Marcus's expression shifted from dismissive to cautiously interested. "Can you fix our problem?" Samuel shrugged. "Maybe. I'll need direct access to the server room and administrative terminals, and I'll need your entire technical team to step back and let me work without interference." "Absolutely not," Marcus said immediately. "Our proprietary code cannot be exposed to unauthorized personnel. You can observe and make recommendations, but hands-on access is out of the question." Samuel stood up slowly. "Then you don't really want your problems solved. You want someone to tell you what you want to hear." He turned toward the door. "Good luck with your IPO." "Wait!" The desperation in Marcus's voice was unmistakable. "What do you need?" "Full administrative access, root-level privileges, and payment in advance." "Payment?" Marcus almost laughed. "Elena said you worked for pizza." Samuel smiled for the first time since entering the building. "That's right. One large pizza, pepperoni, from Gino's down the street." The executive team exchanged bewildered glances. David Park leaned forward. "You'll fix $1 million system failure for a $20 pizza?" "If I can fix it, yes." Marcus stared at Samuel for a long moment, his mind struggling to process the surreal nature of the situation. A homeless man was offering to save his company for the price of a pizza, and somehow this felt more threatening than paying a consulting firm $50,000. "This is ridiculous," he said finally. "No one can fix the server? I'll fix it for a pizza." Marcus laughed, but it was the hollow sound of a man trying to convince himself that he was still in control. The laughter died abruptly when Samuel's expression didn't change. "Is that a no?" Samuel asked quietly. The conference room fell silent, except for the muffled sound of alarms coming from the server room 3 floors below. Every second of delay was costing Nexus Dynamics thousands of dollars and moving them closer to complete system collapse. Marcus Blackwell was about to discover that some offers were too good to refuse and too dangerous to accept. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens when Samuel finally gets his hands on the servers he designed. The revenge is just getting started. Samuel waited patiently while Marcus Blackwell wrestled with his pride, his fear, and his rapidly diminishing options. In the background, another alarm chimed from the server room, marking another system failure in the digital house of cards that Marcus had built on stolen ground. The pizza was just the appetizer. The main course was about to be served. The silence in the conference room stretched like a taut wire. Marcus Blackwell stared at Samuel Rodriguez, his mind racing through calculations of risk versus desperation. Every few seconds, another notification chimed from someone's phone, system alerts, client complaints, and increasingly frantic messages from the Goldman Sachs team that was supposed to begin the IPO roadshow in 36 hours. "Fine," Marcus said finally, the word coming out like a physical concession. "David, order the pizza. Get this man whatever access he needs." Samuel nodded calmly. "I'll also need everyone else out of the server room. No observers, no supervisors. I work alone." "Absolutely not," Marcus snapped. "I'm not leaving company proprietary systems unattended with..." "With what?" Samuel's voice remained level, but something in his tone made Marcus pause. "With someone who might actually understand what you're dealing with." David Park cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Marcus, maybe we should..." "Fine," Marcus repeated more forcefully this time. "But I want continuous monitoring. Security cameras, network activity logs, everything documented." "Of course," Samuel agreed. "Document everything. I insist on it." 20 minutes later, Samuel stood alone in the Nexus Dynamics server room, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of hardware that was systematically destroying itself. The familiar environment felt like returning to a childhood home after decades away. Everything was recognizable, yet somehow smaller than memory suggested. He approached the primary terminal and placed his hands on the keyboard for the first time in 3 years. The login screen displayed the Nexus Dynamics logo, but underneath the corporate branding, Samuel could see traces of his original design aesthetic. Marcus had changed the colors and fonts, but the underlying architecture remained Samuel's creation. His fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory precision, entering a sequence of commands that had never appeared in any documentation that Marcus Blackwell had seen. The system responded immediately, unlocking administrative functions that the Nexus Dynamics technical team didn't know existed. The screens around him filled with diagnostic data that told the story of Elena's carefully orchestrated campaign. Every system failure had been triggered by legitimate maintenance protocols, Samuel's original code responding to commands that only he knew how to issue. The system wasn't malfunctioning, it was being systematically awakened by someone who understood its deepest secrets. Samuel opened a secure communication channel and typed a brief message. "Ghost coder active. Beginning evidence compilation." The response came immediately from Elena. "Standing by. Morrison's committee has subpoena power ready. FBI cybercrimes unit on standby. Make it count." Samuel cracked his knuckles and began to work. In the executive conference room, Marcus paced like a caged animal, while David Park monitored the security cameras focused on the server room. On screen, Samuel appeared to be typing steadily, his movements calm and methodical. "What's he doing?" Marcus demanded for the 4th time in 10 minutes. "Running diagnostics, it looks like. He's accessing systems that I didn't even know we had. Look at this." David pulled up a network monitoring screen. "He's reached administrative levels that our own IT team has never accessed." Marcus felt a chill of unease. How is that possible? "I don't know. It's like he has administrative keys that were built into the original system architecture." The intercom crackled to life. "Mr. Blackwell?" It was Jessica, his assistant. "There are 2 FBI agents here to see you. They say it's about a federal cybersecurity investigation." Marcus's blood turned to ice. "FBI? Now? They're in the lobby. Should I stall them?" Marcus hissed. "Coffee, magazines, whatever. I need 5 minutes." He turned to David with wild eyes. "Get Rodriguez out of the server room. Now." "Marcus, if we interrupt him while he's working on the system..." "Get him out!" David reluctantly picked up the phone to call the server room, but before he could dial, Samuel's voice came through the intercom system. "Mr. Blackwell, could you come to the server room, please? I think I've found your problem." Marcus practically ran through the corridors, his mind spinning with paranoid scenarios. FBI agents didn't show up at technology companies by coincidence, especially not during critical system failures. Someone had called them, someone who knew exactly what they would find. He burst into the server room to find Samuel standing calmly in front of the main display screen, which showed system diagnostics that Marcus couldn't begin to understand. "What did you find?" Marcus demanded breathlessly. "Your system isn't broken," Samuel said quietly. "It's working exactly as designed. Someone with administrative privileges has been accessing your network remotely for months, creating artificial failures and documenting security vulnerabilities." Marcus felt his legs go weak. Who? Who would have that kind of access? Samuel turned to face him, and for the first time, Marcus saw something in the homeless man's eyes that made his blood freeze. Recognition, intelligence, and something that looked very much like justice. "The same person who designed the system in the first place," Samuel said. "The same person whose company you acquired 3 years ago for pennies on the dollar. The same person whose military technology you've been selling to civilian clients without authorization." Marcus's face went white. "That's impossible. The original developer had a mental breakdown. He's been out of the industry for years." "PTSD," Samuel corrected, "caused by discovering that his commanding officer was selling classified defense technology to private contractors. One of those contractors was a young venture capitalist named Marcus Blackwell." The server room fell silent, except for the hum of cooling fans. Marcus stared at Samuel as if seeing him for the first time, and in a way, he was. "You," Marcus whispered. "You're Samuel Rodriguez, former captain, United States Army Signal Corps, original architect of the Pandora Protocol, and the person whose stolen technology built your entire company." Marcus backed away as if Samuel had become radioactive. "You can't prove anything. We acquired that technology legally. We have contracts, documentation. You have fraudulent paperwork covering up the theft of classified military assets," Samuel said calmly, "which is a federal crime. The FBI tends to take that sort of thing seriously." As if summoned by his words, David Park's voice crackled through the intercom. "Marcus, the FBI agents are on their way up. They have a federal search warrant." Samuel smiled grimly. "You should probably call your lawyer." The elevator chimed, and moments later 2 federal agents in dark suits entered the server room. The lead agent, a tall woman with graying hair and steel blue eyes, held up her credentials. "Special Agent Rebecca Chen, FBI Cyber Crimes Unit. Marcus Blackwell, you're under federal investigation for violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, theft of government property, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." Marcus's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Agent Chen continued, "We have a warrant to seize all computer systems, financial records, and corporate communications related to the Pandora Protocol and your acquisition of Pandora systems." "This is insane," Marcus managed finally. "You can't just storm into my company based on some homeless person's accusations." "Mr. Rodriguez isn't just some homeless person," Agent Chen interrupted. "He's a decorated military officer and a cooperating witness in a federal investigation that's been ongoing for 18 months. His testimony, combined with documentary evidence we've already collected, forms the basis for this warrant." Samuel stepped forward and handed Agent Chen a USB drive. Complete system logs showing 3 years of unauthorized access, data theft, and evidence tampering. Network forensics, proving that Nexus Dynamics has been selling modified versions of classified defense software to foreign corporations. And audio recordings of executive meetings where Mr. Blackwell explicitly discussed covering up the illegal acquisition of government technology. Marcus felt the world tilting around him. "You recorded us? That's illegal surveillance." "It's evidence of federal crimes," Agent Chen corrected. "Mr. Rodriguez was acting as a cooperating witness under federal protection. Every recording was made with proper judicial oversight." The second FBI agent, a younger man with a tablet computer, began photographing the server room while documenting serial numbers and system configurations. "Agent Chen, the network topology matches exactly what's described in the warrant. This is definitely military-grade architecture." Marcus sank into a chair, his perfect corporate facade crumbling like wet cardboard. "You planned this, all of it," The system failures, the emergency consultation, everything. Samuel nodded. Elena Vasquez has been building this case since you stole my company. She's been feeding information to Senator Morrison's cybersecurity committee and the FBI's cybercrimes unit. The server failures were just a way to get me inside your building with legitimate access to systems that contain evidence of your crimes. The pizza, Marcus said suddenly, his voice hollow. You wanted me to say it. On camera. You wanted me to mock you publicly. I wanted you to demonstrate exactly the kind of arrogance that convinced you to steal military technology and build a fortune on other people's work, Samuel replied. The pizza was just symbolic. Agent Chen looked up from her tablet. Marcus Blackwell, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. As the Miranda rights continued, Marcus could only stare at Samuel Rodriguez, the homeless veteran he had mocked, the broken soldier he had dismissed, the genius whose stolen work had built everything Marcus thought he owned. The FBI was here. The evidence was documented. The system he had built on stolen ground was collapsing around him, and there was nowhere left to run. Justice, it seemed, had finally learned how to code. The 32nd floor of Nexus Dynamics had transformed into a federal crime scene. FBI agents moved through the executive offices with methodical precision, seizing computers, boxing files, and photographing everything that might contain evidence of corporate fraud. The sterile corporate environment that Marcus Blackwell had cultivated now buzzed with the efficient chaos of a federal investigation. Agent Rebecca Chen established a command center in the main conference room, her laptop connected to portable servers that would allow real-time analysis of the seized digital evidence. Samuel Rodriguez sat across from her, no longer the dismissed homeless man, but a key federal witness whose testimony would anchor the prosecution's case. Walk me through the technical evidence, Agent Chen said, pulling up the data from Samuel's USB drive on her screen. I need to understand exactly how Blackwell stole the Pandora protocol. Samuel leaned forward, his voice taking on the precise cadence of a military briefing. In 2021, I was developing cybersecurity systems for the Pentagon under a classified contract. The Pandora protocol was designed as a defensive system to protect critical military infrastructure from state-sponsored cyber attacks. He pointed to a series of code snippets on Agent Chen's screen. Every function I wrote contained embedded authentication markers, digital signatures that would allow the Pentagon to verify the system's integrity and trace any modifications back to authorized personnel. Like a watermark? More sophisticated than that. Each authentication marker contains encrypted biographical data, service records, and biometric identifiers that are mathematically impossible to forge or duplicate. Agent Chen scrolled through pages of code, looking for patterns that would be meaningful to a federal prosecutor. How does this prove Blackwell stole your work? Samuel highlighted several sections of code on the screen. Look at these function names. Rodriguez, Crypto, init, SAM, Auth, Protocol, Ghost, Coda, Verification. Blackwell's team renamed some of the user-facing components, but they never touched the core architecture. They didn't even understand what most of these functions did. The conference room door opened, and Agent Chen's partner, Agent Michael Torres, entered with a banker's box full of seized documents. Chen, you need to see this. We found the original acquisition paperwork for Pandora Systems. Agent Torres spread the documents across the conference table. Samuel felt a familiar knot in his stomach as he saw the contracts that had legitimized the theft of his life's work. Here's where it gets interesting, Agent Torres continued. According to these documents, Blackwell purchased Pandora Systems for $200,000 in March 2022. The seller is listed as S. Rodriguez, acting CEO. But look at this. He pulled out a medical record with Samuel's name and a VA hospital letterhead. Samuel Rodriguez was committed to a psychiatric facility for severe PTSD on February 15, 2022. He was in no condition to authorize the sale of his company. Samuel's hands clenched into fists. I was catatonic for 6 weeks. Couldn't speak, couldn't recognize family members. Elena had to fight for guardianship just to make medical decisions. So who signed the sale documents? Agent Chen asked. Agent Torres flipped to another page in the contract. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, listed as Rodriguez's military liaison and legal representative. Except here's the problem. Morrison was arrested by military police in January 2022 for selling classified defense contracts to private contractors. The pieces of the conspiracy fell into place like a puzzle Samuel had been trying to solve for 3 years. Morrison was my commanding officer. He had access to all my research, all my security clearances. When I started asking questions about unauthorized transfers of my technology, he had me declared unfit for duty. And while you were hospitalized, Agent Chen said, following the timeline, Morrison sold your company to Blackwell for a fraction of its value. Then Morrison disappeared before his court-martial, Agent Torres added. Military investigators suspected he fled the country with at least $2 million in illegal payments from defense contractors. Samuel felt the rage that had been burning in his chest for 3 years, finally crystallizing into something useful, evidence that would send Marcus Blackwell to federal prison. There's more, Agent Torres continued. We found email communications between Blackwell and Morrison dating back to 2021. They were planning the acquisition months before Rodriguez's hospitalization. He pulled out printed emails that made Samuel's blood run cold. From M. Blackwell, a Nexus Dynamics. Come to J. Morrison, us.army.mil. Subject, Pandora Acquisition Timeline Jim. The tech is exactly what we discussed. Rodriguez's PTSD episodes are getting worse. Medical evaluation should provide the opening we need. Ensure all documentation shows voluntary sale. Wire transfer ready for your offshore account. M. Samuel stared at the email, his vision blurring with fury. They planned my breakdown. They used my PTSD as a weapon against me. Agent Chen placed a hand on his shoulder. Samuel, I need you to focus. Can you prove that the Pandora Protocol contains classified military technology? Samuel nodded grimly and turned to Agent Chen's laptop. Every classified system contains what we call canary protocols, hidden functions that activate when the system is deployed outside authorized parameters. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, entering commands that penetrated deeper into the Nexus Dynamics network than their own administrators had ever gone. Watch this, Samuel said. The screen filled with a new interface that none of the FBI agents had seen before, a monitoring system that displayed real-time data about every client that Nexus Dynamics had ever served. The Pandora Protocol has been secretly copying data from every company that uses it, Samuel explained. Financial records, communications, strategic plans, everything. It was designed to gather intelligence on foreign corporations that might threaten national security, but Blackwell has been using it for corporate espionage. Agent Torres whistled softly. How many clients? Samuel scrolled through the list. 237 corporations across 15 countries, including several companies that are definitely foreign intelligence fronts. So Blackwell has been selling classified surveillance technology to potential enemies of the United States, Agent Chen summarized. Worse than that, he's been giving them a backdoor into the computer systems of American companies. Every business that bought the Pandora Protocol became a potential intelligence target. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just corporate fraud. It was a national security disaster that had been unfolding for 3 years while Marcus Blackwell collected profits and accolades. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the caller ID and her expression grew serious. I need to take this. It's the U.S. attorney. She stepped into the hallway, leaving Samuel alone with Agent Torres and the overwhelming evidence of betrayal that covered the conference table. Samuel picked up one of the printed emails and read it again, trying to process the calculated cruelty of men who had weaponized his trauma for profit. "You okay?" Agent Torres asked quietly. Samuel shook his head. 3 years. I've been living in my van for 3 years, thinking I was crazy, thinking I had imagined the whole conspiracy, and they were getting rich, selling my work to foreign intelligence services. Agent Chen returned, her expression grim. That was U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh. She's authorizing a full national security investigation. NSA, CIA, Pentagon. Everyone wants to know how classified defense technology ended up in the hands of foreign corporations. What does that mean for Blackwell? Samuel asked. It means he's looking at charges under the Espionage Act, not just wire fraud. We're talking about 25 years to life in federal prison. Through the conference room windows, Samuel could see Marcus Blackwell in his office across the hallway, surrounded by FBI agents who were methodically dismantling his empire. Blackwell's face was ashen, his usual arrogance replaced by the hollow-eyed desperation of a man who had finally realized the magnitude of his crimes. Agent Chen closed her laptop and began packing the evidence into secure containers. Samuel, you need to understand something. Your testimony isn't just going to destroy Blackwell's company. It's going to expose a conspiracy that reaches into the Pentagon, the defense contractor industry, and possibly several foreign intelligence services. Samuel nodded. I know. Elena explained the scope when she first contacted me. Are you prepared for what comes next? Congressional hearings, national media attention, death threats from people whose crimes you're exposing? Samuel thought about the past 3 years, the nights sleeping in parking garages, the looks of disgust from people who saw him as human garbage, the constant struggle to maintain his sanity while knowing that his life's work had been stolen and perverted. Agent Chen, he said quietly, I've been dead for 3 years. Marcus Blackwell killed the person I used to be when he stole my company and destroyed my reputation. Whatever comes next can't be worse than what I've already survived. Through the glass wall of the conference room, Samuel watched as FBI agents led Marcus Blackwell away in handcuffs. The man who had built $1 billion empire on stolen ground was finally being held accountable for his crimes. But Samuel knew this was only the beginning. The evidence he had helped compile would unravel a conspiracy that had compromised American national security for corporate profit. The pizza had been served, but the feast of justice was just beginning. The ghost coder was back, and this time he was working for the federal government. The perp walk happened at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon, precisely when Austin's business district was at its busiest. FBI agents escorted Marcus Blackwell through the marble lobby of the Lone Star Tower in handcuffs, his Armani suit wrinkled and his carefully styled hair disheveled. News cameras that had gathered outside captured every moment of his fall from grace. Samuel Rodriguez watched from the 32nd floor conference room as Marcus was loaded into an unmarked federal vehicle. 3 years of rage and humiliation crystallized into a moment of cold satisfaction. The man who had stolen his life's work and mocked his circumstances was now facing the same public humiliation that Samuel had endured. Booking photos will be public record within the hour, Agent Chen said, checking her phone. The U.S. attorney is calling a press conference for 6 p.m. This story is about to go national. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Samuel could see reporters setting up cameras in the plaza below. The Nexus Dynamics logo, still gleaming on the building's facade, would soon become synonymous with one of the largest corporate fraud cases in cybersecurity history. Agent Torres entered the conference room, carrying another box of evidence. We found Blackwell's personal communications with offshore accounts, wire transfers totaling $12.7 million over the past 2 years, all tied to sales of the Pandora Protocol to foreign entities. Samuel shook his head in disgust. He was getting rich selling my military technology to Chinese intelligence fronts, Russian cybercrime syndicates, and Iranian state hackers. and he had the audacity to call it his innovation. Agent Chen's laptop chimed with an incoming video call. She accepted the connection, revealing U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh on screen, speaking from her Washington office. Agent Chen, excellent work. The evidence package you've compiled is exactly what we need to move forward with federal charges. Mr. Rodriguez, your cooperation has been invaluable. What's the timeline? Samuel asked. Federal grand jury convenes Monday morning. We're seeking indictments on 17 felony counts, including violations of the Espionage Act, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit treason. If convicted on all counts, Blackwell is looking at life without parole. Samuel felt a grim satisfaction. Justice moved slowly, but when it finally arrived, it was thorough. There's something else. U.S. Attorney Walsh continued. We've been monitoring Blackwell's communications since his arrest. He's been trying to contact his co-conspirators to coordinate their stories. Agent Torres looked up from his laptop. Including Lieutenant Colonel Morrison? Morrison is beyond our reach. He's been living in a non-extradition country since 2022. But Blackwell doesn't know that. We've been letting him believe that Morrison might cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for leniency. Psychological pressure, Samuel observed. Make him think his partners are going to betray him. Exactly. And it's working. Blackwell's lawyer is already making noise about a plea agreement. The conference room fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. Marcus Blackwell, the arrogant CEO who had built his empire on stolen military technology, was already preparing to save himself by betraying his co-conspirators. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it and smiled grimly. Blackwell's assets are being frozen as we speak. FBI Financial Crimes Unit is seizing his bank accounts, his penthouse, his collection of vintage sports cars, everything he bought with the profits from stolen military technology. Samuel thought about his own possessions, a modified van, some salvaged computer equipment, and the clothes on his back. The contrast was almost surreal. What happens to Nexus Dynamics? He asked. The company will be liquidated, U.S. Attorney Walsh explained from the laptop screen. All assets will be seized as proceeds from criminal activity. Employees will lose their jobs, investors will lose their money, and clients will need to find new cybersecurity providers. How many people are we talking about? Agent Torres consulted his tablet. 412 employees. Approximately $50 million in investor capital, and clients include some major corporations, banks, healthcare systems, government contractors. Samuel felt a pang of sympathy for the innocent people who would be collateral damage in Marcus Blackwell's downfall. The employees had been working in good faith, believing they were part of a legitimate technology company. They had no way of knowing their CEO was a fraud who had built the entire enterprise on stolen military assets. The clients are the real problem, Agent Chen added. Every company that's been using the Pandora protocol has been unknowingly compromised. Their systems have been copying data to servers controlled by foreign intelligence services. How long will it take to assess the damage? Samuel asked. Months, maybe years, U.S. Attorney Walsh replied. This is potentially one of the largest intelligence breaches in U.S. history. The NSA is already working with affected companies to secure their systems, but some of the damage may be irreversible. Samuel stared out the window at the Austin skyline, thinking about the ripple effects of Marcus Blackwell's crimes. Hundreds of companies had been unknowingly turned into intelligence targets. Thousands of employees would lose their jobs. Millions of consumers would have their personal data exposed to foreign hackers, all because one arrogant man had decided to steal military technology and sell it for personal profit. Agent Chen closed her laptop and began packing the evidence boxes. Samuel, you'll need to remain available for testimony. Grand jury proceedings, congressional hearings, possibly criminal trials that could last for years. I understand. The Justice Department has authorized a witness protection stipend, temporary housing, living expenses, security detail if necessary. Your life is about to change dramatically. Samuel looked around the conference room that had served as the command center for bringing down Marcus Blackwell's criminal empire. After 3 years of living in shadows, sleeping in parking garages, and being dismissed as human garbage, he was about to become one of the most important witnesses in a federal investigation that would make national headlines. "Agent Chen," he said quietly, "I've been invisible for 3 years. People have been looking through me like I didn't exist. Being visible again, it's going to take some getting used to." Agent Torres smiled. "You won't be invisible anymore. After this case breaks, you'll be famous. The homeless veteran who brought down $1 billion fraud ring, the genius who exposed a national security conspiracy, the ghost coder who came back from the dead to serve justice." Through the conference room windows, Samuel could see the FBI evidence van being loaded with boxes of documents, computer equipment, and financial records that would form the backbone of the federal prosecution. Marcus Blackwell's empire was being systematically dismantled, piece by piece, until nothing remained but evidence of his crimes. Agent Chen handed Samuel a business card with her direct contact information. "The U.S. attorney wants to meet with you tomorrow morning. Formal debriefing, preparation for grand jury testimony, and discussion of your ongoing security needs." Samuel pocketed the card and took one last look around the conference room, where Marcus Blackwell had conducted business for the past 3 years. Tomorrow, this space would be empty, the company would be defunct, and the man who had stolen Samuel's life would be sitting in a federal detention cell awaiting trial. "Agent Chen," Samuel said as they prepared to leave, "what happens to the pizza?" She looked confused. "The pizza? I never got the pizza that Blackwell promised me. He said he'd pay me a pizza to fix his servers. Technically, I held up my end of the bargain." Agent Torres laughed. "I think the FBI can spring for a pizza. What do you want on it?" Samuel smiled, the first genuine smile he had felt in 3 years. "Pepperoni, from Gino's down the street, and make sure the receipt goes into evidence. I want it on the record that Marcus Blackwell welched on his debts, even the small ones." As they left the Nexus Dynamics offices for the last time, Samuel reflected on the strange justice of the situation. Marcus Blackwell had lost everything: his company, his fortune, his freedom, and his reputation. Samuel had gained something more valuable than money: the knowledge that truth and justice could still triumph over arrogance and corruption. The ghost coder had returned from the dead, and the digital world would never be the same. The federal courthouse in Austin buzzed with activity as the Blackwell case moved through the machinery of justice. 6 weeks had passed since Marcus Blackwell's arrest, and the scope of his crimes had expanded far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. What began as a case of corporate fraud had evolved into a multi-agency investigation involving the FBI, NSA, Pentagon, and congressional intelligence committees. Samuel Rodriguez sat in the witness preparation room on the 4th floor, reviewing his testimony with federal prosecutors. Gone were the threadbare clothes and defeated posture of his homeless years. The Justice Department had provided him with appropriate attire for court appearances, and more importantly, with temporary housing that allowed him to shower regularly and sleep in an actual bed. U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh spread a timeline across the conference table, marking key dates in the conspiracy that had stolen Samuel's technology and weaponized it for profit. "The grand jury returned indictments on all 17 counts," she announced. "Marcus Blackwell is facing life in federal prison without possibility of parole. His co-conspirators are being arrested as we speak." Assistant U.S. Attorney David Kim pulled out a thick folder of photographs. "We've identified 12 defense contractors, 6 foreign intelligence operatives, and 3 Pentagon officials who were part of the conspiracy to steal and sell classified military technology." Samuel studied the photographs, recognizing several faces from his days as a Pentagon contractor. "Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, still in hiding, but we've frozen his assets in 14 countries. He can run, but he can't access the money he made from selling your technology." "What about the companies that bought the Pandora Protocol?" U.S. Attorney Walsh's expression grew grave. That's where it gets complicated. We've identified foreign intelligence services from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea that purchase the technology through shell companies. They've been using your defensive algorithms to launch offensive cyber attacks against American infrastructure. Samuel felt sick. His life's work, technology designed to protect American military networks, had been perverted into weapons aimed at his own country. The damage assessment is still ongoing, Assistant U.S. Attorney Kim continued, but preliminary reports suggest that compromised systems include power grids, banking networks, hospital systems, and transportation infrastructure. The economic damage could reach into the billions. And it's all traceable to my original code, Samuel said quietly. Which is why your testimony is so crucial, U.S. Attorney Walsh replied. You're the only person who can explain how the technology was supposed to work versus how it was actually deployed. Without your expertise, we can't prove the full scope of the conspiracy. The conference room door opened, and Agent Rebecca Chen entered with Elena Vasquez. Elena looked tired but satisfied, the expression of someone who had spent 3 years building a case and was finally seeing it come to fruition. Samuel, Elena said, taking a seat across from him, I wanted to apologize. For what? For not finding you sooner, for letting you live on the streets while I built this case. I knew where you were for most of the past 3 years, but I couldn't approach you directly without compromising the investigation. Samuel nodded. I understand. If Blackwell had discovered our connection, he would have destroyed the evidence and fled the country. The Senate Intelligence Committee wants to hear your testimony next week, Agent Chen added. Senator Morrison, no relation to the Lieutenant Colonel, chairs the Cybersecurity Subcommittee. She's particularly interested in how classified military technology ended up in civilian hands. U.S. Attorney Walsh pulled out another document. There's something else we need to discuss. The civil asset forfeiture case. Civil asset forfeiture. Every dollar that Marcus Blackwell made from selling your stolen technology is subject to seizure under federal law. The Justice Department is prepared to return those assets to their rightful owner. Samuel stared at the document in disbelief. How much money are we talking about? Assistant U.S. Attorney Kim consulted his laptop. Blackwell's seized assets total approximately $47 million. That includes bank accounts, real estate, luxury vehicles, and investment portfolios, all purchased with profits from the illegal sale of your intellectual property. $47 million, Samuel repeated, the number seeming surreal after 3 years of counting quarters for laundry. There's also the matter of restitution, U.S. Attorney Walsh continued. The companies that were damaged by Blackwell's criminal conspiracy are filing civil lawsuits. You could be entitled to additional compensation as the original victim of the theft. Elena leaned forward. Samuel, you need to understand something. This case is going to make you wealthy, probably very wealthy, but it's also going to make you a target. Foreign intelligence services don't like it when their operations get exposed. Agent Chen nodded grimly. We're recommending witness protection until the trials are complete. New identity, relocation, federal security detail, the works. Samuel considered the offer. After 3 years of invisibility, the prospect of disappearing again, this time with government protection, held a certain appeal, but something in him rebelled against the idea of hiding. I've been running from this for 3 years, he said finally, hiding in parking garages, avoiding eye contact, pretending I didn't exist. I'm done running. Samuel, these people have killed federal witnesses before. Then give me security, but don't make me disappear. I want Marcus Blackwell to see me in that courtroom when he's sentenced. I want him to look at the homeless veteran he mocked and realize that his arrogance destroyed everything he thought he owned. The room fell silent. U.S. Attorney Walsh exchanged glances with Agent Chen, then nodded slowly. We can arrange discreet protection, surveillance team, secure housing, armored transportation for court appearances, but you'll be visible, and that comes with risks. Samuel thought about the past 3 years, the cold nights in his van, the humiliation of being dismissed as human garbage, the rage that had burned in his chest every time he saw Marcus Blackwell's face on technology magazines. The risks of visibility seemed manageable compared to the toxicity of remaining invisible. "I'll take the risks," he said. Elena smiled. "I thought you'd say that. There's something else you should know. The Pentagon wants to offer you a consulting position. Cybersecurity advisor, full security clearance restored, salary commensurate with your expertise. They want to hire me back? They want to hire you, period. Turns out that having your military technology stolen and sold to foreign adversaries is exactly the kind of problem they need experts to solve. Who better than the person who designed the original systems?" Samuel felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope for the future. Not just survival, not just revenge, but the possibility of rebuilding a life that had meaning beyond mere existence. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She read it and smiled. Marcus Blackwell's sentencing hearing is scheduled for next Thursday. Federal Judge Patricia Williams presiding. She's known for harsh sentences in national security cases. "How harsh?" Samuel asked. "She once sentenced a defense contractor to 60 years for selling classified submarine technology to China. Marcus Blackwell's crimes are arguably worse." U.S. Attorney Walsh began packing the case files into secure containers. "Samuel, you've helped us build one of the strongest federal prosecutions in recent history. Your testimony has exposed a conspiracy that reaches from the Pentagon to foreign intelligence services. You've literally helped protect national security." Samuel looked around the conference room where his new life was being planned with the same methodical precision that had once characterized his military service. The ghost coder was becoming visible again, not as a broken veteran living in his van, but as a key witness in a case that would redefine cybersecurity law. "What happens after the trials?" he asked. Elena smiled. "That's up to you. You'll have your wealth back, your reputation restored, and your expertise in demand. You could start a new company, consult for the government, or retire to a beach somewhere and never touch a computer again." Samuel considered the possibilities. After 3 years of having no choices, the freedom to determine his own future felt almost overwhelming. "I think," he said slowly, "I'd like to help other veterans who've been screwed by the system. Use some of that 47 million to create something that prevents what happened to me from happening to anyone else." Agent Chen nodded approvingly. "Spoken like someone who understands that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about preventing future victims." As they prepared to leave the courthouse, Samuel took one last look at the case files that documented Marcus Blackwell's fall from grace. The arrogant CEO who had mocked a homeless veteran was about to discover that some debts could never be repaid, and some crimes carried consequences that lasted a lifetime. The cleanup was almost complete. Soon it would be time for the verdict. The federal courthouse in Austin overflowed with media on the morning of Marcus Blackwell's sentencing. Satellite trucks lined the street, reporters practiced their opening segments, and security barriers held back crowds of spectators who had followed the case through 6 months of headlines. The ghost coder conspiracy, as the media had dubbed it, had become a national symbol of corporate greed and military corruption. Samuel Rodriguez sat in the front row of the courtroom's gallery, wearing a navy blue suit that had been tailored specifically for this moment. The transformation from homeless veteran to key federal witness was complete, but the most important change wasn't visible. After 3 years of carrying rage like a poison in his chest, Samuel felt the calm clarity of approaching justice. Marcus Blackwell sat at the defendant's table in an orange federal jumpsuit, his hands shackled to a chain around his waist. The Golden Boy CEO who had once commanded boardrooms and charmed investors now looked like what he had always been beneath the expensive suits. A frightened man who had built his life on other people's work and was finally being held accountable. Federal Judge Patricia Williams entered the courtroom, her presence commanding immediate silence. Known for her expertise in cybersecurity law and her harsh sentences for national security crimes, Judge Williams had presided over the entire case with methodical precision. "Be seated," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Williams, presiding in the matter of United States versus Marcus James Blackwell. Judge Williams reviewed the sentencing memoranda from both prosecution and defense, then looked directly at Marcus Blackwell. "Mr. Blackwell, you have been convicted by a federal jury on 17 felony counts, including violations of the Espionage Act, conspiracy to commit treason, wire fraud, and money laundering. Do you have anything to say before this court imposes sentence?" Marcus's defense attorney, Jonathan Hayes, stood slowly. "Your Honor, my client wishes to address the court." Marcus rose unsteadily, the shackles making his movements awkward. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely audible. "Your Honor, I want to apologize to the American people for the damage my actions have caused. I also want to apologize to the employees of Nexus Dynamics who lost their jobs because of my crimes." Samuel watched Marcus's performance with cold satisfaction. The man who had once laughed at the idea of paying a homeless veteran with pizza was now begging for mercy from a federal judge. "I was wrong to steal Mr. Rodriguez's technology," Marcus continued, glancing briefly at Samuel. "I was wrong to sell classified military assets to foreign entities. I understand the severity of my crimes, and I accept responsibility for my actions." Judge Williams listened without expression. When Marcus finished, she consulted her notes before speaking. "Mr. Blackwell, your crimes represent one of the most serious breaches of national security in recent history. You stole classified defense technology developed by a decorated military officer, sold that technology to foreign intelligence services, and built a criminal enterprise worth hundreds of millions of dollars on the foundation of that theft." She paused, letting the weight of the charges settle in the courtroom. The damage assessment prepared by the National Security Agency indicates that your actions compromised the cybersecurity infrastructure of 237 American companies, exposed the personal data of approximately 12 million U.S. citizens to foreign intelligence services, and provided hostile nations with the capability to launch cyber attacks against critical American infrastructure. Samuel felt the full scope of the damage wash over him. His defensive technology, perverted by Marcus's greed, had become a weapon aimed at his own country. "Furthermore," Judge Williams continued, "your treatment of Mr. Rodriguez, a decorated veteran suffering from service-connected PTSD, demonstrates a callous disregard for the sacrifices made by those who have served our nation. Your public humiliation of a man whose technology built your entire fortune represents the worst kind of corporate arrogance." Marcus swayed slightly, as if the words were physical blows. "The sentencing guidelines for your crimes suggest a range of 25 years to life imprisonment. However, given the national security implications of your actions and the aggravating circumstances of your case, this court sentences you to life in federal prison without possibility of parole." The courtroom erupted in murmurs and camera clicks. Marcus collapsed into his chair, the reality of spending the rest of his life in prison finally breaking through his shock. "Additionally," Judge Williams continued, "this court orders complete restitution to all victims of your criminal conspiracy. Mr. Rodriguez is hereby awarded the entirety of your seized assets, totaling $47.3 million, plus additional damages to be determined by civil litigation." Samuel felt Elena's hand squeeze his shoulder. After 3 years of having nothing, he was now worth more money than he could have imagined. "Finally," Judge Williams said, her voice carrying the weight of federal authority, "this court recommends that Mr. Rodriguez's case serve as an example to both the military and civilian technology sectors. The theft of classified defense technology will not be tolerated, and those who profit from such theft will face the full consequences of federal law." She looked directly at Samuel. "Mr. Rodriguez, Your courage in exposing this conspiracy has protected American national security and prevented further damage to our cyber infrastructure. This court thanks you for your service to our country, both in the military and as a federal witness." Judge Williams brought her gavel down with finality. "Mr. Blackwell, you are hereby remanded to federal custody to begin serving your sentence. This court is adjourned." As federal marshals led Marcus away in chains, he turned for one last look at Samuel. Their eyes met across the courtroom, the homeless veteran he had mocked and the arrogant CEO who had stolen everything he owned. Marcus's expression held a mixture of hatred and disbelief, as if he still couldn't accept that his crimes had real consequences. Samuel felt no satisfaction in that moment, only a profound sense of completion. Justice had been served not through revenge, but through the patient accumulation of evidence and the relentless application of law. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Samuel as he descended the steps with U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh and Agent Rebecca Chen. Camera flashes illuminated his face as microphones thrust toward him from every direction. "Mr. Rodriguez, how does it feel to see Marcus Blackwell sentenced to life in prison?" Samuel paused, considering his words carefully. "Marcus Blackwell didn't just steal my technology, he weaponized it against the country I served. Today's sentence sends a message that our military technology cannot be stolen and sold to foreign adversaries without consequences. What will you do with the $47 million in restitution?" "I'm establishing the Rodriguez Foundation for Veterans Technology Rights," Samuel announced, the decision crystallizing as he spoke. "Too many veterans have had their innovations stolen by unscrupulous defense contractors. This foundation will provide legal assistance and technical support to ensure that never happens again. Do you have a message for other veterans who might be facing similar situations?" Samuel looked directly into the cameras, thinking of the countless veterans whose contributions had been minimized, stolen, or forgotten. "Don't let them make you invisible," he said. "Your service matters, your innovations matter, and your voice matters. If someone steals your work, fight back. Get help. The system can work if you know how to use it." As the press conference concluded, Samuel walked away from the courthouse with Elena Vasquez. The afternoon sun reflected off the glass towers of Austin's business district, including the Lone Star Tower, where Nexus Dynamics had once projected the illusion of technological innovation. "So," Elena said as they reached Samuel's new car, a practical sedan purchased with his first restitution payment, "what now?" Samuel looked back at the courthouse where justice had finally been served. "Now I get to work. There are probably dozens of Marcus Blackwells out there, stealing technology from veterans who can't fight back. Time to even the odds." Elena smiled. "The ghost coder becomes the ghost advocate?" Something like that. They drove away from the courthouse, leaving behind the scene of Marcus Blackwell's final defeat. The man who had built a billion-dollar empire on stolen ground was now beginning a life sentence in federal prison, while the veteran he had mocked was free to rebuild not just his own life, but the lives of others who had faced similar theft. 6 months later, Samuel Rodriguez stood in the office suite of the Rodriguez Foundation, watching his team of lawyers and cybersecurity experts work on cases involving veteran technology theft. The walls displayed framed patents, military commendations, and photographs of veterans whose innovations had been restored to their rightful owners. On his desk sat a single item that visitors often asked about, a receipt from Gino's Pizza for one large pepperoni pizza, dated the day of Marcus Blackwell's sentencing. It served as a reminder that justice could begin with the smallest of gestures and grow into something powerful enough to topple empires built on stolen ground. Marcus Blackwell had laughed when a homeless veteran offered to fix his servers for a pizza. The laughter had died in a federal courtroom when that same veteran proved that some debts, technical, moral, and legal, always come due. In the end, Marcus Blackwell had learned the hardest lesson of all. When you build your fortune on stolen ground, the original architect always holds the deed, and sometimes that architect knows exactly how to bring the whole structure down. The ghost coder had returned from the digital dead, and the world was a safer place because of it. Fuck around and find out, indeed.